Welcome back to This Was Supposed to Be Easy, your go-to podcast for connection, joy, and a good dose of laughter.
Hosted by two friends who've seen enough of life to know that it's never as simple as it sounds
or looks.
Each conversation celebrates the diverse journeys we travel, the moments of bravery, the strength we didn't know we had, and the joy we find along the way.
Because let's be honest, life is full of things that were supposed to be easy, but turned out to be harder.
And definitely funnier
than we thought. This is Amy.
And this is Cheryl. And if it were easy, we wouldn't be here.
So we're coming off of a pretty big high for the two of us.
Yeah.
The two of us plus our good friend Holly, who has been in a couple of episodes here, did a pretty big presentation this week to a group of individuals on joy and happiness and looking at all of those ways that joy and happiness impact our life, people's lives, really employees' lives as we were talking about it from a work standpoint. But it got me thinking about all of the key components that parallel or influence joy and happiness. And it also really got me thinking about our listeners and what we can bring to them, because I think you and I, Cheryl, heard from so many people before, even kind of during like that lunch hour and after, that they need a connection to joy and happiness right now.
Yeah.
And it really made me stop and think about one of the key pieces, and that was trust. So today I was wondering if for our listeners, we could really talk about trust and the way that trust impacts every area of our life. Like, I don't think there's an area that trust doesn't touch upon.
Right. As you say all of that, I'm thinking, we spent the whole day talking about joyful leadership, but there was this segment of the time where I think you talked about physical environments and how they can contribute to joy. And Holly talked about social environments. And I was able to spend a little time thinking about and sharing about that emotional climate. That is where trust came into the conversation. And I found so much amazing data. Actually, I think I'll share some of it. I found so much really cool data about how having trust in the work environment will impact anything from the productivity of an employee to the energy that they have, all the way to what does it look like to build trust and to have trust. And yeah, again, as we were talking, that goes so far beyond a workplace environment. Trust and lack of trust impact our relationships. And when I say relationships, it can be our partner, it can be our friendships, it can be our parenting relationships. Every aspect of our life can be better or not so great, depending on, I think, where trust fits into the equation, right? And if you have maybe some trauma around trust in one area of your life, it can also impact everything else because it's such an emotional part of our ways that we go about life.
It is, and it, as I understand it too, for certain individuals, that's their core value in life, is that, it's trust, that you have to have trusting relationships and
Well,
relationships that you can trust.
and as you say that, it popped into my head as I was talking, and I don't think I said it during the event, but I did a segment also on, you all know my favorite topic is strengths. So I did a section on strengths and how being able to spend more time on your strengths leads to more joyful work and workplaces. And looking back at my signature strengths, honesty is right up in the top 5. Trust is so integral to honesty that you're absolutely right. Like it is part of those core values for so many people.
So let's get into some of the data. What should we know about trust initially?
Sure, sure. So without getting totally nerdy, I opened the entire day by putting this question up on a slide which was, what if you could help the people in your organization, including you, enjoy their jobs 60% more? I didn't answer that question. I told them, "You will hear the answer to this question at some point today." And it wasn't until later in the day that I answered the question. And the answer to that question was trust, right? So, our ability to trust that our leaders will do the right thing. And having a leader or a partner, or that person you're working so closely with have a trust in you, or have a trust in your employee, or have a trust in your children and your partner is essential. I will spout a few of those statistics, but before I do that, I want to say that I asked people what it looked like when trust was missing, because I think that's sort of essential to the question of why it matters. What does it look like in terms of results if there's trust living there? And it took me back to a lot of work I did with our team of early childhood educators almost 2 decades ago, maybe 2 decades ago now, and the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and the base layer there was trust or absence of trust. It constantly circles up, but let me just give you some of those stats, okay? So, people who are able to spend time in a trusting environment. I'm gonna stop for a second, because what I didn't say was, what does it look like if it's gone? And I wanna answer that first, because I
Okay.
had an idea in my head of what I thought people might say, and literally the first answer was, they yelled it across the room, and I wanna circle back to it, Amy, in a minute, and
Okay.
that's that's the word micromanaging. So write that down, Amy, okay?
Okay.
It's like,
Okay.
write down micromanaging, because I don't wanna forget to
Right.
circle back to this, okay? So let me just give you a couple statistics that I shared out, and I grabbed these statistics from one of my happy books, I call it, because I am a super fan of, and I'm gonna say the name wrong, it's like Meek Wiking. He wrote the book, the Little Book of Huga, the Little Book of Luca, and I have a book that he wrote on why something about the world's happiest people and finding joy in the workplace, and it was focused on Denmark, and he actually is the CEO of the World Happiness Research Institute, I think is the name. I'll make sure it's right in the show notes. But I was using that book for a lot of the information, because he's living and working in a place where people are so much happier than a lot of other places in the world. And I wanted to know some of the data that he's pulled up. And again, he focused on the workplace in this particular set of information, but hear me say these numbers with any other context, okay? Like your role as a human in your family, in your life. When there is trust, there is 74% less stress. And I am all about that.
Oh, me too.
Yeah, right? 50% higher productivity, 106% more energy. Again, all about that.
Mhm.
76% more engagement, 40% less burnout. And this one's maybe a little more specific to work, but I don't know, 13% fewer sick days, right? So whether that's actually because you're not sick as often, or because you just aren't taking the sick days for random reasons related to I'm overwhelmed or whatever it is, right? Those are just some of the statistics that I was able to share about how it looks different when you spend your time in a trusting environment versus spending time in an environment where you're being micromanaged or controlled.
Absolutely. Yeah. I could definitely see all of those things.
So do you wanna talk a little bit about the micromanaging part, or
I do. I do. I think micromanaging is tricky because those that are doing it often never recognize that they are doing it in the moment.
Yeah.
I think most people would say I would actually tie it into a couple of weeks ago, we did an episode on delegation, right?
Mhm.
Another kind of work term that goes into it. I think we even might have touched about micromanage just a little bit in that conversation. And I'm going to go back to that to move forward with it. And it's
Okay.
that individuals in those situations of micromanagement often aren't sitting there going, I know that I'm going to micromanage this. It's, I need this to be done a certain way. And I want to guarantee it gets done that way. And I have all the information. So I'm going to do it that way. Or I've had great success this way and I want that to be replicated. So we're going to do it exactly the same way. And I'm going to tell everybody exactly the way to do it.
I'm gonna throw in there, keep going, but I'm just
Yeah.
gonna throw in there, I'm thinking of some very specific examples that people have shared with me. Absolutely, yes, I'm sort of wanting something to be a very specific way, but also I think sometimes I do think it's a very just a clear message of, I don't believe you're going to work good enough or hard enough or give 1,000% of your time to me and my paycheck I'm giving you if I'm not watching your every move.
Right. How can I trust that? Well, we use the word trust. How can I trust that you're going to do your job? I had somebody tell me just the other day that during COVID times that they were, I mean, and I think I heard this same line in a million different ways. And it was, well, if we let our employees work from home, how will we know that they're actually working?
Mhm.
And so I know people that had to, fill out a spreadsheet of how every hour, every 15-minute increment was spent. I know people that had to take pictures of their work and email them to their supervisor and say, like, this is how, this is what I did today. I
I know
know,
people who had trackers on their computer and they had to make sure their finger moved on the mouse pad. Like if they were gonna go to the bathroom, it was the last thing they did and the first thing they did when they came back because there was a way that the company was tracking how much movement happened.
right, clicks and
Yeah.
and also were they just randomly punching keys or were they actually it was measuring, okay, what are they typing? It's almost like
Yeah.
that ghost imagery of your computer. Yeah, absolutely. And all of those things, in my opinion, say, I don't trust you. And
Mhm.
I think even when we talk about trust in the workplace, to find an employment or a place of employment that does trust you and trusts you to be a full-fledged human being and trusts you to bring yourself whole self and creates environments in which they say, I trust you to do your job is huge. But I
Yeah.
also think about that from a family perspective. When you can
Mhm.
be part of a partnership in a family that says, I trust you to show up in the way that I expect you to because I know you. And I know that you're the person that does the things and shows up. And when you say it to your children, especially littles as we talk about, but even bigs, especially as your children grow up, I think of teenagers a lot like with this, and as a mom of teenagers right now, I've had to check myself a few times because I think the expectation is always that, "Oh, you can't trust a teenager. They're going to constantly try to get something over with you." And I would say sometimes they will. Like, I don't wanna completely disregard that statement because there is a natural reoccurring sense of pushing boundaries, right?
Mhm.
But I think individuals I like to believe that even teenagers are a lot more trustworthy than most of society gives them credit for.
Yes.
And I think that if we could even demonstrate to the individuals that we care about that we trust them, I think our relationships in whole would be better. Like, I think about for myself, I remember when my daughter was really young. So she's 20 now. I remember when she was much younger, and I was a micromanaging partner. And I have to recognize my contribution in this, even though it's something I am definitely not proud of it. But I remember I didn't go away, like, where I wasn't spending a night at home with my daughter, until she was 3, and then I had some issues with a family member, and I had to go away for a little over a week to help with some of those things, and it was in a very almost kind of traumatically quick, situation. I had, like, laid out clothes and said, like, "Okay, you can do this, this, and this," and all of these different things, and I remember finally I kind of lived that way if I would go away for maybe the first year, so maybe 3 to 4, and finally I was like, "What am I doing?" Like, I was over functioning for my partner way too much in that, and I think he was also happy to let me because it made his experience with her easier, and that I would lay out her clothes and I would, have kind of, here are her foods and this is what she can eat and all of that, but what it really got me to thinking because one of the parenting sayings that I absolutely despise, and I will it's my hill to die on type of thing,
You will go on record
I will
saying
go
that.
on record saying is I despise when individuals would say to me, "Oh, is Jeremy babysitting today?"
Oh, yeah.
Because if you are a parent, you are not babysitting. Like, if you are the dad or you are the mom, like, you are never babysitting. And so I remember being like, "You know what? I need to treat him like he's not babysitting." He's her
Mm,
dad. And yes, I might be doing a majority of the parenting things while he's doing a majority of the work things, even though, he was parenting some and I was working out of the house too. But I needed to trust that, hey, you know what? He can put on purple leggings and a green sweatshirt and her hair could be brushed. It might not be brushed. Life is still going to go on
yeah.
and she's still gonna be safe, and he loves her, and that they are going to have a better relationship because I wasn't trying to dictate how that relationship worked, and that was a really hard, hard moment for me to come to, but it improved so many things because also I didn't have to work so damn hard. Like,
Mhm,
I was so exhausted trying to micromanage those relationship pieces to keep them going, and I realized it was a lack of trust on it wasn't a lack of trust to them, but that's what I was saying in my
mhm.
actions. It really wasn't, but I didn't know how not to do it too.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, control is expensive, and
Yeah,
you can think about that in terms of money if you're talking about the workplace, but it's expensive in relationships too.
yeah, and
Be
time.
Yeah, because when there's trust, everything is richer. It makes your days easier. It makes your relationships better. It allows you to worry less. I can think of so many scenarios where people are in a controlling situation, whether that's a partnership relationship, whether it's co parenting, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's even inside of a friend group, right? Where you have
Mhm.
someone who's trying to control. And I keep thinking of this equation, right? Control equals what? Control equals people backing off. Control equals people doing less because they resent. Control very often equals people saying, "See you later. I'm done."
Yeah.
And that, that impacts every single sort of relationship I think we have going on.
I think so too. And then so then the question becomes, and especially I can almost hear some of our listeners now thinking like, okay, maybe I was in that situation where I didn't trust, but I have reasons that I don't trust,
Yeah.
right? Like when we think of situations where trust is easy, I think it often comes from a lot of trust being shown in the past. I think a lot of people will bring their baggage and have that impact or determine how they potentially see situations too. Like recently, I was giving a presentation on appreciation and gratitude in the workplace, again, because that's where I often talk about things. But the example was that for every one issue of mistrust, when there's a mismatch in trust, there takes 5 situations of trust to work on repair. But
Mm.
then also the flip side of that is if an act of mistrust happens, it potentially took 5 episodes of trust leading up to it to believe that it wasn't an intentional harm or an intentional trust.
Very much like some of the statistics on when you hear a negative, and I won't criticism, when you hear a
Yeah.
negative criticism or a negative comment or a negative anything, it takes what, about 9 positives to not erase it, but start to level it out. So similar, yeah.
Yeah, very similar. I think what both of those situations are that you can ruin a relationship a lot faster than it takes to build a working relationship.
Yes.
Both of that. And because I use the example is that imagine you have a new employee and that you walk into the room and you had a terrible morning. Like, let's say the dog got out and ran down to the neighbor's house and you ran out of coffee. You got in your car and you were driving to work and somebody stopped short in front of you and you tapped into another car. Like there could be so many things. Let's say you lost your phone. I mean, all the list of whatever could go wrong that morning did. And you get to work, you walk in, and you're like, oh my gosh, like, and you just start, this morning is terrible, blah, 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 blah. If you have an existing employee, they might who knows you well, that have opportunities that trust has been established, they might come into your office and say, what's going on? Like, you don't seem like you today." And they trust that that's not you, because they have lived experience that that's not you. But if you have a brand new employee and they're a week, 2 weeks in on the job, and you come in doing that, and they don't know you, and they don't have the, like, they might question, like, "Oh gosh, is this person? Is this their behavior? Like, is this a safe environment?" Or they also might think like, "I need to start looking for another job. This isn't what I wanna be a part of." But the thing that's even harder is people don't like to be embarrassed. Imagine in that situation, the first employee who knows you walks in and says, "Oh my gosh, what's going on?" And you say, "Ugh, I'm so sorry. I had such a rough morning. The dog got out. I spilled coffee. I got into a minor car accident. I don't know. I just want to go home. You know me. I'm sorry. This isn't how I am." How likely are you to go to the new employee who now doesn't want to come into your office and say, "Hey, you know what? I behaved in a way this morning that wasn't really me.
Mhm.
And I had a rough morning and that's making excuses but I realized that maybe I presented myself in a way that made you question whether this is the right place to be, and I just want to say like this is not normal and I'm really sorry for that." I think we're much more likely to see one when somebody comes in and says, "Hey, what's going on?" I don't think we're as likely to see 2, where somebody actually seeks out the person who's now questioning, like, "Oh, did I do something? Was that me?" To say like, "Hey, this was totally me. I didn't bring my best foot forward." And I think the same thing goes with, and I'm actually seeing it a lot in this generation of workers, this new kind of Gen Z worker situation, is that embarrassment and the correction from the embarrassment. So on the flip side, let's say you're a new employee and you oversleep and you show up late on, your second or third day of work. It's much more likely that the first thought then of that your coworkers or the leader might be, "Hey, is this who I hired that they don't show up?" Because we haven't had the experience where if let's say your employee of 2 years doesn't show up one morning, "Oh my gosh, this is so unlike them. What happened? Did they get in a car accident? Did they oversleep? What's going on?" Where we're willing to ask those questions instead of criticizing, even though it could have been the exact same situation for both people. We
Mhm.
often have a tendency to think the negative thought because we haven't built trust. And if we haven't built trust, then we have to go to our past experiences to borrow trust from that. So if
Yeah.
you have somebody who has, let's say, not built up that experience, well, if they didn't have a very trusting previous relationship, let's say they had a micromanager for a boss that they just left. Ooh, that is a really dangerous combo to then say, like, this is a safe place for me to be because they have so many experiences of mistrust. But let's take it out of the workplace and put it in the home. Let's put it in a new relationship. So if you're, let's say, starting a new relationship and you're dating somebody and that person was supposed to call you at 7 o'clock and they didn't call you, is your initial thought of, "Oh, I wonder what happened," or "Great, I'm being ghosted. They're never going to call me again. And I guess it's over." And in that situation, are you more likely to just say, like, it's over, I'm walking away before it ever got started, or to try to do that repair work if, let's say, it was a mess up? Hey, you know what? I know I was supposed to call you at 7 o'clock, and I'm not trying to make excuses. This, and this happened. I just want to tell you, I recognize that I screwed up and I'm sorry. You know what? I'm going to really, that's not my norm, and actually step up and try to do that repair work versus being like, I'm embarrassed I didn't call them. I am going to ghost them. And as an employee or a new employee, yeah, you know what? I overslept and that's not who I want to be. I'm just not going to show up again. I'm too embarrassed to face what I did.
Yeah, as you gave both of those work and home or real life examples, you literally touched on, I sort of talked about 5 ways to build trust because, you and I, we always like, so what are we going to do about it? Right. I talked about 5 ways to build trust, and your scenarios like directly hit 4 of them.
Layer
Right.
them out. Let's hear
Right.
them.
Well, I mean, so obviously the first one is be honest. The fastest way to destroy trust is to lie or to not give that quick little background story that can provide context to someone who doesn't know you as well even. So, we all make mistakes. And if we've made a mistake or we've done something wrong, just say it. Just I appreciate so much when someone just I don't know, fesses up to the crap that happened in the last 3 hours and or the mistake or
Mhm.
forgetting even or, whatever it is, to just be honest and say, "Ooh, I screwed up," or I don't know the answer to this, and I'm not gonna make crap up. I'm gonna ask for help or, give me
Mhm.
some direction," whatever it is. So, first one was be honest. You talked about listening and listening with that intention of being empathetic, truly trying to understand their perspective, to see them, and that builds so much trust. And the other 2 are super closely related, and again, you talked about if someone knows you better because they've known you longer, they're more likely to ask the question that allows you to explain yourself, or they're more likely to say, "This isn't like you. There must be something going on." So, there's the whole idea of giving things time. It takes time to build trust and understand how people work and know more of the layers of a person and a person's personality, but it also then speaks to valuing those long-term relationships that we have in all aspects of our life and to do the real work of building those relationships, maintaining those relationships. If we're thinking about the workplace, making sure there's opportunities for people to not only build those relationships with us, but with each other, right? So there is value in having some of that social piece, right? Like allowing people to connect with each other, to understand each other, to know each other, to take part in activities that can help people feel like they belong in whatever that team is or a relationship is, so that that togetherness and belongingness can grow to a place where the relationship matters and I'm going to stick it out even if there's this random scenario where something didn't go right or I might have I'm not sure if I trust that that's really what's going on, right? But if there's a long-term relationship there, we have those opportunities to give a little grace and open up. Yeah.
So, what happens then? And I don't know if maybe this is kind of, I have heard this situation happen a lot, and it's that when somebody has been in a situation where mistrust has been broken or trust has been broken so many times that they then feel like they can't trust that the world is a safe place to be,
Mhm.
or the job is not a safe place to be, or things like that. How might you encourage someone to really trust themselves when sometimes we lie to ourselves internally
Mhm.
to know that they can make the right decision for themselves?
It's a really easy question to answer, Amy, and I just lied to you.
Right, right. This was supposed to be easy, and that's a pretty loaded question.
Right, as you were forming your words, I was like, "Well, yikes, is there an answer to that?" Because I was thinking about it from both sides, right? I shared that honesty is one of my signature strengths, and sometimes it shows up in my signature strengths because it's the fact that I'm really known for saying what I'm thinking,
Mhm.
right? Even if maybe I shouldn't have. Brutal honesty is sometimes a way that's described, but there have been moments in my life where I've made mistakes, right? I've maybe gotten to a point where, "Oh, crap, now I'm in this situation, and I don't want to I don't want to ruin." I don't know, it could have been a relationship, it could have been trust, it could have been all kinds of things, and so I'm gonna try to fix it quietly. I'm gonna try to get it fixed before people find out that I made this mistake. And when you're in that space of maybe trying to do the right thing quietly, and you're living in that space of not feeling aligned with your values, I can hear Adam Grant in one of those recent podcasts with Brené Brown just say, that's when it's so hard for you, right? Because you're trying to correct a wrong, but at the same time, you're living and or acting not aligned with this value, or, that other word I use, signature strength. And so I'm thinking about those questions from that perspective, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's so hard internally when you're not being aligned to something that matters to you at a super, super, super deep level. So that was one piece of your question, but that other piece was, gosh, you were devastated. You were devastated by someone. How do I ever get back to trust? That's the other piece of it. And gosh, easy answer is you just sort of have to try not to let that influence every other relationship that you have, and not begin to mistrust everybody because this one person did this deep wrong. But that's not an easy answer either.
No, no, and I think of it as communication in addition, like, in that second part, like, of what you just said, where let's say somebody let's use a deep portrayal of, let's say, a significant other cheating. And now I'm not a therapist, I don't play one on TV, and I'm not, like, looking to do that, but
But you almost were.
I almost was a therapist, very good point. Yes, almost was. But I do think of the fact that it's really an opportunity to say, we are either going to move forward together. And I think, and I say this in a relationship, in marriage or dating, we're going to move forward and we're going to look towards something collectively while we have opportunities for repair,
Mhm,
or our relationship is never going to look the same again. And we might have to still continue to interact with one another. Let's say there's children involved or things like that.
mhm.
And so let's figure out how that is going to look moving forward. And
Yep.
then switching over into a work environment, was the trust damaged so deeply that that leads into somebody leaving or a firing? But let's say it doesn't. Let's say it's a position where somebody isn't. Then are there opportunities for repair work and communication? Let's say you say, you know what, this is a fireable offense, but I wanna work on this, and I don't wanna say it's done just yet if you don't want to, but it can never happen again. So
Mhm.
what can we do to repair the trust that has been lost since this big screw up?
There's building trust the first time, and then if you're on a pathway where you have to rebuild trust, it's a lot harder.
Yeah, right. Because I can imagine where if that happened 3 or 4 times in someone's life, those big issues, it's hard to say the next time relationships are significant others are trusting people.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, and
my
if you
yeah,
spiraled into self-protection.
right. And I would say if anybody's listening to us and
No,
they're
yeah,
like, "I don't trust people anymore," then my thought is always do the work with a quality therapist. There is no
Yes.
shame. I love my therapist. I think she's fabulous, and I've had multiple therapists over the years at different times in my life. I think therapy can be a really great thing, and so I'll plug that real
Yes,
quick,
please, thank you.
Yeah. Always know that there is an option out there for to figure some of that out.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
that might be trust in other people, but it also could be trust in yourself.
yeah,
How did I let myself, get into this relationship, get into this situation, stay in this scenario, right? And so, there might be work to be done in terms of reconnecting with ourself and trusting ourself again.
yeah, and I think learning how to trust ourselves can be almost sometimes harder than trusting somebody else. It takes work in the similar way. I think that communication with yourself, looking at why your thoughts are happening, where are those thoughts coming from, and what do you want to do about it, and who do you want to be as a person? How do you want
Mhm.
to show up for other people? How does that look?
Yeah. So without going down that path of I don't even mean without going down that path of, right? There's so many different ways we can look at trust from situations that have broken trust to just being a person who is trustful, right?
Mhm.
I would love to just maybe as we begin to wrap up be thinking about me as a person, where I am today, and what can I do to take steps to just make sure I am able to show up as a person who is being, making sure I'm a trustful person. It doesn't just magically appear, right? Like there are things we can do to show ourselves and present ourselves as trustworthy.
Right, and I think some of that, like you mentioned earlier, the repeat opportunities of being trustworthy and continuing to show up and continuing to communicate and believing that there are opportunities for people to be good and for people to be trustful. And I think too, leading with the thought that situations will happen, but if a situation happens, that doesn't automatically mean that's the end all be all of that
Who you are.
yeah, who they are. So, as we are ending with everything, what is your favorite way then to show up for somebody, to show that you're a trusting person?
Very good question. I think my gut quick answer, and tomorrow I'll have thought about it a lot more and want to give you more information probably. But I think for me, the gut answer that I'm coming with is, that when I know myself and I can authentically be myself, I feel like that's the best way for me to show up as being trustworthy if I can be honest and say if I can or cannot contribute or participate or what it is that I can offer in a way that allows me to honor that. And sometimes that means I'm learning to say no sometimes, right? Or even I guess right now, and one thing I'm really noticing is that because quality time matters to me, I whatever moment I'm in, I want to be fully present in that moment and not be multitasking or any of those things. I guess just to honor that I know that quality time matters and I want to be fully present and not be overcommitting so that I can't be fully present because there's 3,000 other things and then I know 5 are going to fall off and then I look untrustworthy. That just all is kind of coming together into a package for me of, just like do whatever I can to honor the time I'm giving someone and saying no so that I'm not overcommitted and falling through the cracks on some of the things.
I think to sum all of that up, I am hearing you say holding good boundaries and holding good boundaries for yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. Thanks for being my little therapist today.
I know. But I would also like to say, as your friend, I think you do that amazingly. And
Oh,
I think that I love that about you. And I think that all of those things though are definitely present and are a great reason to have trust in people. And so
How
I
about you, though? How about you?
for me, okay, yeah, I can't get away. I can't
Yeah,
ask a
no, no,
question
no.
and then get away from it. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay. So to wrap this up, I think boundaries are huge because everything you just mentioned, I have a tendency to overcommit myself and I feel so terrible about myself when I commit to something and can't do it. Being realistic. So one of the best things I can do in trusting myself is being realistic in what I can and cannot do. So those things are right on. And I think the other thing too that has been a little bit harder for me, but is equally as important as the communication part of the repair. And actually this is goes along so well with Brene Brown's work, but it's the this is the story I'm telling myself right now and I need to check in with you to see, is this the accurate story of what happened?
Mm,
And to somebody else or with somebody else. Like you came in the room right now yelling, and I'm right now thinking that you're mad at me. Or the story I'm telling myself right now is that you're mad at me. And I just need to check in with you. And if it is, I need to know what I need to do better. Or if it's not, I need to know that it's not, because this is what is cycling through my head. And it's not easy, but that piece, in order to have trusting relationships, because our brains are crazy things and they fill in the blanks when we don't have them in the most dangerous of
yes,
ways, right?
yes.
When we start the lies that we tell ourselves, I have to tell myself all the time, I need to make my brain a more trustful place because my brain can lie to me. And so I have to recognize I can't always trust it to be the bearer of the news, the accurate news, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so learning how to question creatively and appropriately to my own brain and ask the people who can give me the real answers and then believe them is probably the best form of trust that I am currently working on. I am not an expert, but I try every day.
Okay, so I am hearing, as we close out, the value of boundaries, the value of communication, checking in on the reality of the story with someone we can believe and trust.
Yeah, and don't micromanage.
Don't micromanage.
All right. With that, have a great day. Thanks for tuning in to This Was Supposed to Be Easy. Remember, the best stories are the ones we live.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep the conversation going because life may not be easy, but listening in should be.
Stay curious, stay connected, and keep wondering.